Alafia and good afternoon. I'm Dr. James Conyers, Director of Africana Studies here at Kean University, and of course, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2018 Office of Africana Studies African History Month lecture series and celebration. I'm always very, very, very happy whenever we have an audience because getting audiences here nowadays is somewhat difficult for a whole host of reasons, and of course, throughout the year when we have lectures, or I do lectures, and I'm going to be doing a whole series of them this year all over the place, just like all of our guest speakers. I'm all over the place. I'll be at Rahway Hospital next week, and this is the first time I'll be speaking at Rahway Hospital, and I'm kind of all over the place right now, so I'm a little bit disheveled myself mentally. And I just did one outside last week I think it was last week, for the Pan-African Student Union in the cold outside. And so I'm on call all the time. And I just recently saw something, and I'm just touting a little bit of information here. I just recently saw something last week's edition of New York City's Amsterdam News, and maybe DeLacy might know who this person is. There's a writer in the Amsterdam News who calls himself, uses a pseudonym, calls himself Autodidact. And someone called me up on the phone and said, well, get the Amsterdam News. I get it all the time, but I hadn't gotten that copy. Get the Amsterdam News. And so I ran out and got the Amsterdam News. And this person, Autodidact, is in this article that he had written. He wrote an article on someone that I've become more or less someone people call about, a great person in our history that very few people really know anything about, Dr. Edward Wilmot Blyden. Actually, I wrote my PhD dissertation on him. And this person is talking about Blyden in this article, and throughout the article, he's quoting me. It was in last week's edition, not the one that came out this Thursday, the week before. He's quoting me throughout the article, and I don't know whether he's read any of my writings or he attended any of my lectures with my sister, Dr. Marimba Ani, or any of that. I can't even figure out who this Autodidact is. I even called the Amsterdam News, and they said, well, he doesn't want anybody to know who he is. But it kind of made me feel good that people like DeLacy and Carol and all of us, it makes us realize that we are making an impact somewhere along the line. And so that there is someone listening, and that we are planting seeds the way Dr. John Henry Clark planted a seed with me, and Dr. Asa Hilliard, all of my mentors planted seeds with me. So I just wanted to mention that because there's no reason why this auditorium should not be full. There's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be full. All of our folks should be here to gather up information. So that's a whole nother issue that we have to deal with. So maybe before I leave this university at some point, and I have no plans on leaving anytime soon, but before I leave, maybe we'll be able to correct some of that. I am, like all of us are, I am moving up. I ain't gonna never see 65 again, okay? And so I am moving up, but I have no plans on retiring. I like what I'm doing, and I feel that I am making impact, even though I try to keep a low profile. When people call me up to do major lectures in places like when I did the John Henry Clark Symposium some years ago, James McIntosh called me up to do it, and I really didn't want to do it because I try to keep a low profile, but I had to do that. So once you do things like that, then people start knowing who you are, but I want to keep a low profile, that kind of thing. But anyway. So once again, thank you for coming out. Before I introduce our speaker and read a little bit of the bio, let me just tell you about what's happening this week, and maybe you can come out again. Of course, every day this week, well, not every day, except for Friday, today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Thursday, and then next week. Today, we have our guest speaker, who I'll introduce momentarily. Tomorrow, we have Sergeant DeLacy Davis, who's in the audience with her here, and it's today, and it's because of him that we got to introduce ourselves to today's guest speaker, which was very, very important. DeLacy knows everybody, so if it's not for DeLacy, there's a lot of things we would not be able to do. And then on Thursday, we have a sister that I grew up with on the Lower East Side. I'm from the East Village, Avenue D on the Lower East Side, and we have a sister that I grew up with who was the former president of the Black New York State Correctional Officers Union, Marsha Lee Watson, and she's going to be talking about the prison system. And then next week, we're going to have our brother who's been here several times, former FBI agent Tyrone Powers, and that's going to be really, really interesting. But all of our guest speakers have been really, really interesting and informative, so that's important. Also, Thursday at 4 o'clock, starting at 4 o'clock here in this auditorium, we're going to have our annual Jackie McLean African Heritage Jazz Concert. And Jackie McLean's son, Renee McLean, is going to be performing with his band. I grew up in the house of Jackie McLean. I grew up with Renee McLean. Used to be a trumpet player myself back in the days, but I saw what was happening in the industry. They weren't making any money, and I had to give it up and move on to something else. But my ambition was to be another, not Miles Davis, not Dizzy Gillespie. My ambition was to be another Freddie Hubbard. You know, and so I got to hang out with these people at the house. I got to meet Sonny Rollins and just sit with them, and Dexter Gordon and all of those people. So it was a great experience, and people have been asking me to write about that. And at some point, maybe I will. You know, I am literally someone that grew up in the house of Jackie McLean, so I got to see all of the giants, Charlie Mingus and everybody come through the house, even the artists like Romare Bearden, that we didn't know it was him back in those days, because they called him Romy, and we hadn't put the Romare Bearden together with Romy, you know. But looking back on that, it was a great experience. So we're going to have that concert on Thursday in here. And by the way, it's a jazz concert, but we also have a portion of the concert where we do spoken word and rap, as long as it's positive, and the musicians will back you up. They will improvise behind you. It's been very successful. So if you have any positive words, any positive poetry, and you want to come out and have an audience and have a band and get a recording of that, please come out on Thursday. We just want to know that it's positive. I might even do a piece myself. I was thinking about doing a tribute to Gil Scott-Heron and Marvin Gaye from their piece, Inner City Blues, with the poetry of Gil Scott-Heron. So I've been thinking about doing that. Now, don't expect me to sing now. I can't sing, all right? But I'm going to do my best. So I just wanted to give you that bit of information. So today we are extremely fortunate to have someone, and she was here last year, and I said to myself last year, and I mentioned to DeLacy, I said, listen, we have to have this sister come back. You know, we got all these brothers here talking about what it's like to be a former police officer, the racism in the department, what's going on in the United States. We need to have some sisters. We did have Marsha last year, but we need to have some sisters. And she was sitting in the audience, and I said to myself, and I might have mentioned it to you right then, said to myself, we have to have her come. And I think DeLacy went through the contacts and got us going, and so today we have her here. So let me just read a little bit of the bio and bring her up. Sergeant Carol Russell, born and raised in Union, New Jersey, graduate of Union High School, class, well, I don't know if you want me to say the class, but she don't mind, class of 1975. Class of 1975, attended Mercer County Community College, mortuary science major, worked for New Jersey State Police as a dispatcher, worked at New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission for 14 years, pursued a career in law enforcement, at which time she joined the Trenton Police Department. During that time, worked in patrol, community relations, and the Trenton Public Schools, as a certified GREAT, GREAT, and DARE instructor. Appointed to detective and assigned to the Internal Affairs Bureau. After 3 years as a detective, she was promoted to sergeant, working until retirement in October 2010. Presently works for the Family Support Organization of Union, located in Plainsfield, New Jersey, as their community outreach coordinator. So with that being said, I don't know if I can say anything else. Let's bring up our sister, our guest speaker, Sergeant Carol Russell.
Thank you. Thank you. What a wonderful audience. Thank you for coming out. How's everybody? Good? Everybody on the front row, how y'all doing? All right. As Dr. Conyers just gave you just a little bit of my bio, which I think over the years, and I'm proud to say, 60 years of living, I am blessed to be here, and there is a lot in between all those lines of that bio. And I will, with that being said, just give you a little piece about my career in law enforcement as a law enforcement officer. Sean. Is it good? Am I good, Sean? Okay, let me see if I'm hitting the right thing here.
Life is like a big merry-go-round. You're up and then down, going in circles, trying to get to where you are. Everybody's been counting you out, but where are they now? Sitting in the same old place, just faces in the crowd. Well, we all make mistakes. You might fall on your face, but you gotta get out. I'd rather stand tall than live on my knees, 'cause I am a conqueror, and I won't accept defeat. Try telling me no. One thing about me is I am a conqueror. I am a conqueror. Got
Hey, Lieutenant, I might be a stolen radio. Hey, Lieutenant, stolen radio. Check 183, that's the THV. Avenue, that's where the THV is. Mark. Shots fired. Morris.
Shots fired. It's calling this someone shot.
There's two things going on, sir. Crime detective.
I hope that this opening audio and video really got your attention to how precious life really is and the risk that every single police officer, both male and female, take every day. Police officers take every day, he or she that puts on the uniform, goes out in there to their respective communities to protect and serve. And I'm just going to speak a little bit about the history of policing and how we as African Americans integrated into law enforcement. The first woman in policing was Miss Alice Stebbins Wells. That was in 1910. Women were initially called matrons, and matrons basically cared for the female arrestees. They oversaw the women quarters in the jails and just made sure that they were cared for during their time of detention. They made sure things were orderly, and they also transported them back and forth to court. Miss Wells was officially given that title as policewoman, and she was hired by the Los Angeles Police Department as a detective. She was portrayed pretty much as a very masculine woman wearing very oversized uniforms. But regardless of her appearance, Miss Wells opened the doors for women in law enforcement. We talk about African Americans coming into law enforcement?
The first thing
The first African American female came into law enforcement into policing in 1916. Her name was Georgia Ann Robinson. She was the first African American female police officer in the country with the Los Angeles Police Department. Ms. Robinson retired after 13 years of policing and was very active in many civil rights projects, such as the desegregation of local beaches, the discriminatory hiring practices in the public schools. And at that time, then she passed away in 1961 at the age of 82. Today, throughout law enforcement, black women have assumed positions as officers, instructors, chief executives, and special agents. Yet, minority groups still remain underrepresented to varying degrees in nearly all local law enforcement agencies. We want to talk about some of the advantages of women in law enforcement. It's sometimes said women shouldn't be in law enforcement, shouldn't be in policing. It's a man's job. It's still considered a man's job, and women aren't very welcomed when they come into the agencies. A lot of the advantages of women being in policing. Women are better at diffusing violent confrontations before they turn deadly. Women police officers would stop police brutality. Females are capable of solving problems and having better communication skills. We speak about America has finally begun to acknowledge that it has a police brutality problem. Some conversations have been around possible solutions which focus on police officers now utilizing and wearing body cameras, having better training, and a stricter use of force policy, along with the need for community engagement. And one critical idea that I feel is really being overlooked is the increasing numbers of women in the police ranks. And I'm going to just read a quote to you from David Cooper, who is the former police chief of the Madison Police Department in Madison, Wisconsin. Chief Cooper states that women in policing do make a difference, a big difference. They make for a better police department. He said, haven't you wondered why police women are not the ones involved in recent officer-involved shootings? They are usually smaller, somewhat weaker in strength, and yet they don't appear to shoot suspects as often. Females are tremendous assets when it comes to investigating crimes against women and children. Being placed in the youth section, working with children who come into the different agencies, different police departments, also working in the schools. And the children look towards the females as more as a mother figure, where looking at a male officer seems to be scarier to a child. Females pretty much rely more on their interpersonal skills than their physical force. So with all that being said, the question becomes, are current recruiting tools missing out on the female population as potential candidates? And that's a question for all of us to think about. I'm sorry, just one moment. Give me just one moment. Having females and having them recruited into our police departments, if needed, changes in recruiting and hiring policies can have a dramatic impact on increasing the number of women in police departments. Police leadership must place recruitment of females as a high priority, and there is a need for more specific and enforceable directives placed on police departments to recruit and hire more women who mirror the racial and ethnic diversity of the communities. The process of requirements joining a police law enforcement team, there are educational requirements. Most requirements are to at least have a high school diploma, and it would be to your advantage to have college. There's an age minimum, and you must be a citizen. Age minimum is 18 years of age. There's a physical criteria. You will be required to take a physical test, agility test, in order to get onto the police force, which is usually more difficult, and I need to stress, more difficult for females than it is for males. You must take and pass a drug test and a criminal background. Be conditionally hired and complete several weeks of a required police academy training. And then you will be hired as a full-time police officer. And then continue being trained as you're on the job once you get hired. There are many challenges that African American females face while in policing. Couple questions also are we as police communities doing things that hinder and or scare women away from the job? As I mentioned before, this is a man's job. They don't welcome you. They don't want you in breaking up that network, that male network that's within police departments. Are we as a society still stereotyping police work as a male role? And does the Hollywood version of police work send a message to women that this job is impossible? We look at TV and we think that is policing, but a lot of the TV is played for the camera. You need to know that the benefits can be great. Great for your self-esteem, if you go out and excel and remain confident, as we would say, strong in your spot. You have to be able to get past the nonsense of men thinking women should not be on this job. You have to persevere and know that the sky's the limit and break that glass ceiling. The dangers are huge. Policing is a dangerous occupation, and it would make anyone think twice about entering that field. But you can't live in fear. You have to go out and face it. Yes, it's dangerous, and it seems to be getting worse every day. But it's the unknown that usually heightens your anxieties. And finally, because there's a lack of women in the field of law enforcement, there are many young girls who don't have the opportunity to see police women as role models in their communities. We are looking for more women to come on to the job in policing so that those young ladies in the community do see that they could also be police officers. Your police department should definitely mirror your community. Additional barriers are double standards. Let me go back and speak about some sexual harassment that police women experience. Sexual harassment is especially common in the male-dominated work settings, particularly in blue-collar occupations, such as policing. Numerous forms of harassment have been identified as sexist jokes and comments about women depicted in teaching materials. Men's use of derogatory terms like girl and whore when talking about women. And that also couples on the stresses for African American women in policing. Minority and women police officers are subjected to unique stressors on the job. Exclusion from informal channels and supportive information, subjection to being ostracized, overt racial or sexist comments by white officers. Similarly, women officers often are viewed by their peers as incompetent and denied access to information, as if they cannot do the job as competently as their white counterparts. Additional barriers are the double standards, being able to balance your family and your career. And I could give an example of my own as being my entire career of being a single parent. When I initially went on to the job, my children were 3 and 4 years of age. And I raised them as a single parent by myself my entire career. Now I say by myself, and I'm saying without a significant other in my household. But my supports, my formal and informal supports, were my parents. God rest their soul, may God be pleased with them. And my child caregiver. And I can say that if it was not for my child care provider to this day, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. She was able to take care of my children morning, noon, and night, holidays, weekends, it did not matter. They literally basically lived at her house. So much to the point that my children called her parents mom and papa. They went on trips, my kids went. They went away, wherever they went, my children went. So it was a blessing that I was able to find someone so dedicated and willing and caring to take care of my children while I was out doing my job. Peer acceptance is another stressor for police officers. It's one of the greatest pressures of operating within police organizations. You have this willing to desire to become one of the best cop you can. You want to be the good officer. That is a strong motivator for you during your career. So who wouldn't want to be voted Police Officer of the Year? I think most every cop would. I would love to put that on my resume, but I can say I was never voted Police Officer of the Year. And female police officers often work harder to prove themselves to be more accepted by their male partners. A lot of female police officers have very, very, very foul mouths. And it's not very becoming, but they just feel that is a part of being accepted by their peers. Hanging out with the guys, going to the bars after work, hanging in the back parking lot, having tailgate parties with the guys, drinking. That's a feeling of acceptance for a lot of females. And again, balancing family and work. Another stressor is for younger female officers that come on, and they may want to start a family. So pregnancy may seem to be a hindrance to them. Women need to know that if they choose a career in law enforcement, especially policing, should they choose to become a mother while on the job, that their job will not be in jeopardy. That's a stressor for you. Are there policies in place for maternal leave? And having a policy regarding pregnancy needs to be made available to all employees. And the policy should address the Family Medical Leave Act, light duty, disability insurance, and paid leave issues. A lot of African American women's relationships with white women, and is reported that often they view their white female peers as needing more protection from male officers when involved in threatening street encounters. But African American females, they pride themselves in not needing that same protection. Their lifelong experiences have helped them handle those type of situations. They kind of feel, and this is research, they kind of feel that they've been on the bottom for so long that they feel a lot stronger, internally stronger. And just a note that this is documented research. They feel that they're offered very little protection, and as I had so stated, they're exposed to profanity, sexual harassment, experience subordination and exclusion. Black police officers often experience marginality as a result of the expectations held by the dominant majority for their dual roles as majority group members and as police officers. Just a little note on how they can reduce and manage some of these stressors. The cause, and again, the causes are poor management, inadequate or broken equipment, family and relationship problems, financial problems, health concerns, and difficulty working a second job just to make ends meet. And I was one of those officers. Worked 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Also, they talk about being in policing is very stressful. You're dealing with different people every single day. So being exposed to those people suffering from distress and pain, threats on officers' lives and their safety, having to stay in control with your own emotions even when you're being provoked. And the responsibility, believe it or not, of owning a firearm. Your firearm, you better have that before you have anything else. Don't worry about a phone, don't worry about anything. You are so responsible for that weapon. So some of the managing tools are to plan meals and make healthy eating choices. No high-calorie diet. Stay away from the fast foods. Do it now. Do not eat fast foods. Schedule vacations. and have your own personal downtime. One thing the men don't do, and we as women get so caught up in our work, we don't have regular checkups or go to the doctor like we should. And that's imperative. Live within your financial means. Do not overspend. And create a realistic exercise program and get regular exercise. I placed these two articles here. One both I experienced on the job. Being an outspoken officer, now you're subjected again to being ostracized and questioned by your white counterparts. And by doing that, their question is, it's about a loyalty, and the loyalty is to the blue. So the question became, are you black or blue? I was born black. And before I put that blue uniform, I was born a black woman. So that's where my loyalty lies. And my loyalty also lies to the oath that I took to protect and serve the community that I was working in. So my loyalty was always to, and my words were, my people. So I was criticized about, Russell, you always talking about your people. Yes, because I took that oath to protect and serve my community. And during my tenure, while I was a detective in internal affairs, I was very outspoken about the gangs that were in our town. In the year of 2004 and 2005, Trenton became inundated with gangs. As you can see here, there's an article up here about the Bounty Bloods. That's a set of the Bloods. And during that time, my son became involved with gangs. That was very hard to deal with while still being actively on the police force. I made it my business to take a week off to just manage and get things together, make sure that he had an attorney, get him through court. And it was, and we talk about those stressors, it was very stressful. And at that point, you look around and say, oh my gosh, where is everybody? And I did have that close network who helped me hold it together. So just to tell you a tidbit about that story, and I had to deal with that the rest of my career, of going to court when he had to go to court, and being subjected to, oh, how could her son get involved with gangs? She's a cop. Well, my son didn't see me as a cop. My son saw me as mom. And even though we know as parents, we talk to our children, but they decide, mom said go right, but I just want to make this left turn. And that's exactly what my son did. So at this point in time, my son was an adult. He had never gotten in trouble. I was not that parent that had to keep going back and forth down to the youth section to get him out. That didn't happen. He was very active in school, in sports. He played football. He ran track his entire life from around 4 years old all the way till he graduated high school. But the one thing I started seeing a difference in my son in his senior year. And I kept asking him, because I knew what was going on in my town. Are you involved? Let me back up. He never told me no. And he never said yes. So he didn't confirm and he didn't deny. And his thing was he didn't want to lie to me. But I knew, because every parent, if you really pay attention, you know your child. My son wound up going to prison for 11 years for a homicide. Praise God, he was not the shooter, but just your mere involvement. And as a law enforcement officer, we talk to our children and tell them about who they involve themselves with. You know the old saying about you're judged by the company that you keep. So if you're around that type of company, you're going to be looked at, that's what you do. Well, he was just a driver. But he got 11 years. So I'm going to fast forward from that time, and all of this, again, was while I was on the police force. Now, those stressors talk about what we're supposed to do when we're under stress. I was under stress, and I handled my stress, I can honestly say, not in the right way. I handled my stress wrong, because what I did was I was like that Energizer bunny, and I stayed going and going and going and going, so I didn't have to really think about it, because I didn't want that downtime to think about what was going on with my son and where he was at this time, because he wound up getting arrested. So I worked, I got 2 and 3 jobs, and I enrolled in school. I took classes till I couldn't see straight, and I just worked, went to school, worked, and went to school. I can proudly say now that in the middle there, that's my son. Thank you. He has gone to, and we're talking about resources, and I'm so blessed for where I work at the Family Support Organization of Union County, where we do render services to parents and primary caregivers that have children in the New Jersey system of care with special needs. But it's about relationships and resources that are available to you. And as a county resident, took advantage of the resources available, and the New Jersey Community Food Bank located in Hillside had a culinary arts program. My son eventually came home after doing his 11 years. He went to the Community Food Bank. He graduated from the culinary arts program, and presently now he is a junior sous chef at an upscale restaurant in Baskin Ridge, New Jersey. So let me just introduce you to my son. Son, would you stand up, please? Once again, I'm proud of you, son. So we talk about recognizing the stress. I did talk about the healthy lifestyle, having some time off, and the best medicine is some humor. So that video that you listened to, the audio video, can anybody tell me what it was they think they heard in that video?
I think that was the sister in New York City, the cop in New York City was shot in a car, and the one that they just gave the family the apartment, Mia Sotos.
Yes, Mia Sotos Familia. Yes, sir.
I think that's who that was.
Absolutely. So there are so many officers that we need to pay homage to that have lost their lives in the line of duty. These 2 ladies, for some reason, just touched me, and I chose to put them out onto my PowerPoint. Master Sergeant Deborah Clayton was killed. She was an Orlando police officer down in Florida. She also got killed in the line of duty and was very active in her community. And this young lady, Officer Mia Sotos Familia, that was the 911 call from her partner after she had got shot in the head while sitting in the command post actively on duty by a man who had mental illness. And again, this job, it's a good job. It really is a good job. But you cannot go onto this job looking at it like you look at the job on TV. This job is real, it's serious, there are dangers, there are advantages and disadvantages. All the things that I talked about, the stressors, it's all there. But it is very, very beneficial. And I got through it with all that I had going on all those years. I made it and got through it unscathed. And that's a blessing. So I just want to thank you all for coming, for being out. I thank my co-workers, each and every one of you, always so supportive, so loving, and I appreciate y'all, and I do love all of y'all. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Sergeant Russell. I learned a lot about what it is to be I mean, I could never be one. I mean, I'm a man. But what it is to be a female police officer and the stresses that they go through. And I would dare say the stresses that all people of color who engage in the criminal justice system as police officers, correctional officers, or anything else have to go through. Certain things came out to me, and it reminded me, of course, and these are movies, but I have a lot of friends that are police officers and correctional officers and so on and so forth. And it's very, very complicated. First thing that came to my mind was a couple movies that I saw about the internal operations of the police department that Sergeant Russell mentioned in terms of having to deal with white officers. It was two films in particular. One was an old film and one was a more recent film, was The Glass Shield. That was one film. And another film was an old film back in the day that everybody slept on called Across 110th Street. And inside of that film, there was an actor, Yaphet Kotto, who had said in the film, and this is what you were mentioning about being a part of, feeling a part of everything, how he had to brutalize his own people in order to feel a part of the police department. And sometimes when we enter the police department, we kind of lose ourselves. And so my question to Sergeant Russell is basically this, and probably DeLacy might want to weigh in on this because DeLacy has been involved in this. The police department, and I've read a number of books on this, of course, The Real War of Crime and African Americans in the Criminal Justice Systems, and a whole bunch of other books on this. The police department clearly is inherently a white power structure. And what you might call the conscious black cop enters into the police department in an inherently white power structure, understanding what happens in the society overall that makes people of color the targets of the criminal justice, the police and the criminal justice system, and then you're inside the system trying to do some good, and then you face all of these different obstacles, and even the obstacle of having to understand the psychology of our people and how we got to be where we are, because there is a lot of mental illness in our community, and there are things that happen that are really the development of hundreds of years of social development that leads us to those positions that we're in, and you have to understand this, and then at the same time, you have to make arrests. So there are things that go on internally that are, are really problematic. And so my question is, and I think you alluded to this, is that conscious cop of color dealing with this inside the situation, how do you truly deal with this? Because you know all of the parameters of what's going on both in the society at large. In fact, just this morning when I was coming in, I was at Newark Penn Station, and there were a couple of female officers there, the transit police, and I talk with them quite often. And they had this incident just this morning. Some brother went crazy in the station out of nowhere, and they had to deal with it. And then afterwards, one of them with the other officer took him away, and the other one came over to me and had a conversation. And she was saying, in essence, this puts me in a very, very strange position in a lot of ways, because I'm conscious of things that happen in the community and how we get psychologically, what we call cultural misorientation, and how we go crazy. And at the same time, I have to do my job. And in fact, I invited her here today, but I know she had to work. and whatnot. And it's a very, very, for me, as an outsider and as a historian, it's a very strange position to be in. And in many respects, I feel that way here at the university. I feel like I'm an outsider here at the university with people who don't understand the positions that I have to take vis-a-vis the people, the community of people of color right here, and look at me and quite often say, this guy is crazy. Because I have to say things here. We've had some incidents here when I had to get on this stage with police officers and others and had to make statements. And people thought I was absolutely crazy, and had to defend those positions. So my question is, I know you said you had to deal with some of this, and you just want to hear a little bit more about how you dealt with it, and maybe DeLacy, because I know he's been in the fire. I heard DeLacy talk about somebody shot, maybe another cop shot a bullet through his windshield one time, or something of that nature. So let's just hear a little bit more about that.
Well, dealing with that, I just stood on principle. Once I went out, I couldn't go back. You can't go back. So you have to remain conscious. One thing that I do is, or did, was remembered why I was there. I took an oath. Who I was, what my purpose was, where I came from, and who I was servicing. And I would just never forget that. And I wasn't gonna go against that grain just to be a part of a particular organization. And especially when that organization wasn't treating me kindly. And I was very outspoken. I actually had an article where the PBA president called me a racist and said that the organization, the Black Police Officers Organization that I belong to, is also a racist organization. Now, I stood up to that, but the other black officers didn't. I said, do you understand what he's saying? Just because he didn't call you out by name, he's still talking about you, but he just named me, but he's saying, you're just as racist as I am. But they were okay with that. So I just stood strong on my principle and how I felt. And there weren't very many, to be very honest, they're not very conscious. And to this day, they still are not. The organization was put in place for a particular reason to help us in the community, and not just be a social organization having parties and things of that nature. A lot of them that are in the organization now did not want to be there when our previous administration was in, because they claimed we were too radical. We were too radical for them. So they did not, they separated themselves from us. They were black, but they separated themselves from us to keep from being a part of that, because they wanted to be liked and accepted and get the cushiony jobs by their white counterparts.
And that's the reason I mentioned it, because as far as I'm concerned, if we don't have conscious black cops and Latinos and others going into the police force, then they're of no good to us, as far as I'm concerned. They're just helping to perpetuate what is there already. They'll understand, and they're doing exactly what Sergeant Russell is saying. They just want to be a part. I saw a group of cops on TV, on some program, come together and were criticizing Brother DeLacy here, talking about how crazy he is and so on and so forth. These were black cops. Now, if we don't have cops of consciousness, what difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference. If you're there and you just want to do a job and have a gun so you can have the Wyatt Earp syndrome and walk down this block or whatever it may be, it's of no useful purpose to us. Dr. John Henry Clarke used to say that everything we do as conscious people should be to serve our community in a particular kind of way. Should be about liberation, should be about education, should be about all those things. And these people here are doing it. But quite often, many of our people go into the system and they don't do that at all. Most of my friends who have become cops, when they went into the system, their idea was, I got a gun, you can't say anything, I can walk down. My friend actually told me, I can walk down this block now, you know, and I can do this and I can do that, and or I can, you know, I know that the Lord's going to back me up, so I can do anything I want to you. You know, you saw a New York white guy. He was a MTA officer, New York City Transit, and just was telling a few cops, there's somebody in the car here that's acting up, I need your assistance. They didn't like the way he said it to him, beat him up and arrested him. It was on TV. He just beat the case recently. And so it was a power thing with a lot of people. And I've seen this quite often. Does anybody ever have any questions for Sergeant Russell? Because I know people should have some questions, especially the women. Should have some questions here.
Yes, ma'am.
I more so had like a few comments and questions too. You'd mentioned like the sexual assault earlier, sexual assault in the sexual harassment basically, and I kind of was like pairing it together with what you said on like discouraging and disparaging, like most women, like how they might feel like it's not a place for them. Because from what I've read, there is more, like there is a bit of that too, and I was looking up cases. I'm sorry, my thoughts are like all over the place. So my camera's off. But my voice, it throws me off. Basically, I wanted to ask more about like the culture of sexual harassment in the force, pretty much, is what I was trying to say.
The culture of it, and I was speaking of it for African American females, and it coming from men in general, the males in general, but mainly our white counterparts. And your question? Oh, I wanted to know in retrospect to. You mean if a woman, complains, is what dropped?
The culture of sexual harassment dropped as more women began entering the force.
It still exists. I mean, I'm not on the force, and that would, lead me to do even more research about your question, but it still exists. It's still on the force. And just...
facilitated the ability for them to actually be progressive and demand reform. And we one black male officer, and that was Walter Bush. We had to sue them twice, in 1995, 1998. He finally settled with them, and he retired by going to the Union County Prosecutor's Office for the last 5 years of his career. And so they still didn't have any females when he left there. So it is really a good old boys network and working backwards. I was trained for a female officer.
Well, when it came down to us we did have separate lockers. Okay, locker rooms. Oh, thank you. We did have separate locker rooms. There were procedures for them to file complaints. We actually had a couple officers who literally filed sexual harassment complaints against our own police director. And through the state, we had more training on sexual harassment. So we had internal training for that same particular thing that you're talking about.
You know, I think from the historical point of view, if we look at this is a systemic problem in this particular culture that we're talking about. Whether you're a police officer or not, a female in anything, really can experience this. Paula Giddens once wrote a book called When and Where I Enter about African American women and what they've gone through in this country, dealing with the National Association of Colored Women and other things. However, one of the things she points out in the book is something that came across in the United States and in Europe right through the Victorian age. It was called the cult of true womanhood. Now, I don't know how many people have ever heard of that. It was nothing written, but it was just an idea that men, including black men, developed in this country. In fact, people like Booker T. Washington held on to things like that. In fact, one great example of that was when Madam C.J. Walker went to the National Association of Black Businesswomen. She was refused entry because she was a woman. So the black men were acting as chauvinistic in many ways as the white men were, even though she, as we say in the streets, bogarted her way in and told them off. You should read her speech, what she told them. But the cult of true womanhood is something that has been both vocally spoken of and not so vocally spoken of. And what it really meant was, and you heard this from presidents and others, it meant keep them barefoot and pregnant in so many ways. All right, keep them in their place. This is not their job. This is not their world. And of course, right now we have a president and we have other people who think that also. You know, it makes me wonder why so many people went out and voted for him, especially white women. All right? Obviously, they thought they were getting something somewhere along the line, of course, that they're not going to get. And so it's systemic. You know, the casting couch in Hollywood, Weinstein and everybody now, that's come to the fore, but that's always been there. You can go back and look at old actresses like Hedy Lamarr and people way back in the days. What was the woman, I can't think of her name right now, used to say, come up and see me sometime. Mae West. I mean, the things that she had to deal with, people like that. And so it's systemic. Along with racism, sexism, and capitalism are systemic parts of this system, and there's no way to get around it. The culture has to change. And so that's important to recognize. Again, you got somebody sitting in the Oval Office who's defending this and has about 25 women accusing him of stuff, and every time something comes up, he says, well, you have to take into consideration what the man thought. You have to, you know, he says he didn't do it, okay? But he never says, as has been pointed out, never says one thing about all of the women accusers, all right? And so, again, this goes from the top down, but it's systemic in this society. Keep them barefoot and pregnant, and that's a hell of a thing to say, isn't it? Keep them barefoot and pregnant. I mean, exactly. And that's all we think a woman is good for? As I always tell my students, women are our sisters, our mothers, our wives, all rolled up in one. And if you disrespect any part of that, you've disrespected yourself. All rolled up in one. That's why I tell them, the young brothers, that's the reason why, and I don't care what the rappers say, that we should never call a woman, I don't care any kind of woman, a bitch or a hoe for any reason. Just like we shouldn't be using the N-word for any reason. But of course, they disagree with me. They say I'm crazy. Any other questions?
For young ladies who are not quite sure what they want to do in their future, as they become 17, 18, 19 years old. The idea of becoming a policewoman in some ways is glorious, but the other end of it is the fear of, will I get shot early in my career? What can be done to, could you explain what is done to help young ladies so that they won't be in a position, if they do go on the police force, have to be in that position of being fearful about, safety?
One of the things I feel is that you have to know what you want to do. Policing isn't for everybody, and you have to be sure that that is the field that you want to go into. And you have to know that those dangers are there, but what you also have to do is to prepare yourself. You can't live in fear. If you're the type of person that is just fearful all the time, or, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to get shot, oh, I'm scared I'm going to get hit by a car, oh, it's not going to be for you. That job is not for you. You have to want to do it. There's a lot of things that go with that job. And I'm not saying fear should be on the back burner, but that shouldn't be the first thing you encounter when you get up in the morning, that you're afraid to go out and the job's not for you. If you're living in that fear, then I say it is definitely not for you. And for that young lady, those young ladies who you said are not sure, well, you got to be sure this is what I want to do. Like I ate, slept, drank, dreamed of being a police officer. I knew in my heart of hearts that's what I wanted to do. Like I totally put aside that whole mortuary science thing, and I said, "Oh, I want to be a cop." And I worked towards it, and that's what I did. So my answer to you is that you got to be sure. That's not a questionable, because if you go into it being questionable and fearful, well, you're going to be like that on the street. There are times you got to make a split decision, and I'm talking in seconds, that can cost you or someone else their life. So you can't be iffy about yourself in a situation like that. You got to be sure. Was that? Well, that was one of the things I was discussing with a coworker of mine about that whole training piece. Now, to be prepared, prepare yourself. If you having any thoughts about being a police officer, you need to start prepping yourself prior to filling out the application. Like if you know you're going to fill this application out, you need to start doing the things that are going to get you ready for this academy. I know for a fact women fell out of the academy on a larger scale than the men. And the critical times during that academy are within the first 6 weeks. You have to meet certain benchmarks within those 6 weeks, and if you don't meet them, you're out. And most of the times, and I know for a fact now, that so many females have failed out already. And it has to do with the strength, the upper body strength. They fail in the physical portion. They fail out with firearms, because it takes a certain amount of strength when it comes to working that firearm. And they take you out on the range, you got a whole week that you have to train firearms, and you're constantly pulling that trigger, and you get sore, and then after a while you just get weak at it. You have to shoot the shotgun, and that's all up in here, and you're tearing up your shoulder. So it's conditioning. You have to condition yourself, and you need to do that. You need to prepare on the front end to get yourself ready for it. Start running. If you know down the line, this is what I want to do, start doing it a year before. Start running, eating properly, and exercising, and becoming astute on the criminal law. And it will really help you in the end.
Are there any other questions? Okay. I want to thank Sergeant Cal Russell for coming out and enlightening us on this. Let's hear it for her. We really appreciate you, my sister, coming out, spending time, and enlightening us on this very, very important. Before we leave, I'm hoping that you will join us the rest of the week. DeLacy will be here tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we have Marsha D. Watson, the former president of the Black Correction Officers Union, New York State Corrections. And right after that, at 4 o'clock, we got the jazz concert and spoken word. So if you want to, you're into some really great music by a jazz legend, please come out. If you have some poetry and you dare to get up on the stage and have the band perform behind you, we're going to do that also. And it's been very, very successful in the past. And if you want to see me make a fool of myself, because I'm going to get up there, come on out. All right? So thank you for coming out. Please support Africana Studies. In fact, please support all of the programs here at Kean University. Africana Studies, because we're all bound together. Africana Studies, Latino Studies, Women's Studies, Jewish Studies, and Global Studies. We're all a part of the interdisciplinary program. And please support us, because without you, there's no us. Without the students, there's no us. And as you know, they're trying to get rid of programs like ours everywhere, in every university and college in the nation. These programs came out of struggle, and that struggle is not there anymore as far as the powers at large are concerned with. And so we are expendable. So we had to fight to keep this program going, and everybody else has to fight everywhere. I don't know of any university or college in the nation where Black studies, Latino studies, or any other kind of studies is not fighting to stay alive. I'm a graduate of Temple University, the first PhD in the nation in African American studies. I was the first group of students to go through that program when it was founded, and they tried to get rid of that program. That was the most powerful program in the United States, the only place in the United States where you can get a PhD in African American studies, and they tried to get rid of that. So everywhere we're under assault. Exactly. And develop consciousness. Learn something about everything, even things that you're not very much interested in. I study science, I learn everything. The more you learn, as my old professors used to say, the more dangerous you become. All right, and you know you're dangerous when people start telling you think you know everything. You know, everything can't be found in the book. It always amazes me that college students tell me in the classroom, everything can't be found in the book, and you're in college where everything you got to read is found in the book. I have to tell people, even your God is found in the book. All right? People look for their gods in books. And so you're talking here in the university system, when you want to try to stop somebody from saying something or educating you, everything can't be found in the book. That's just a way of putting you on defensive, because nobody wants to be a know-it-all. And that's all that's designed to do. All right? So please come out and support us. Tell other people. We need to have this place filled up. All right? As I said earlier, there's no reason why we shouldn't have everybody. We should have standing room only. You know? We should have monitors outside that people in the hallway can watch. Sister Carol and Brother DeLacy and all the other people. You know, we had Peter Bailey here a couple of weeks ago, one of Malcolm X's lieutenants, good friend of mine. And the audience wasn't even filled up. You know, to talk about both the similarities between Malcolm and King. All right? The place wasn't even filled up. You know, Peter and I have been on panels together, and this place wasn't filled up, which says something about what's going on culturally, intellectually, and a whole lot of other ways that we're trying to, at least I'm trying to address it now. No, these folks are trying to address it. So thank you for coming out. Now, before we go, we have a tradition at Africana Studies, and I'm hoping everybody will join in that tradition. DeLacy knows what it is. We get up on the stage, and we take a picture with our guest speaker for the archives, and everybody is welcome to join us. So please, if you're willing to do that, just come up on the stage. I don't know if anybody here from the newspaper is here, but we take this picture, and if anybody ever wants a copy of it, we'll get it to you. We'll make a copy and get it to you, so you'll have this memory. So is my staff back there? Licia? Okay. Who has the cameras? Is David here? Well, get your phones out, please. And we're going to get up on the stage, and we're going to take this picture.